This week we welcome a new guest. Alex joins us on the show to have a wide-ranging and in-depth discussion. Look, we went everywhere with this one. Dinosaurs, hominids, cataclysm timeline. It was such a wide-ranging conversation. And look, I really enjoyed this one. It's a hark back to what UTC originally was. Alex is an independent researcher who'd been listening to us for a little while, and he reached out through social media to join us. And that's what UTC was about originally. Getting independent researchers to come on the show and share their ideas and build that community. So this one was really cool. I really appreciated it. A little bit of Aussie nature in the background there. That's it for me, guys. Remember, on Patreon, unlocking the code. To my patrons who do support me, thank you very much. I know I suck, however, I really appreciate the few dollars that you send our way. Instagram, Facebook, unlocking the code. You know the drill, guys. Not too sure what song we're going to use for this one as I record this. I'll figure it out though. Plenty of really cool episodes in the bag. Good stuff coming up. Look after yourselves. Be kind, be cool. And we'll talk soon. Cheers.
Today I sat in a field of paper daisies. The gentle breeze made the world wave to me. The day has come with a gold ring wrapped around it. I think I might just bathe in the sun. And I hope my world don't crash in over me, just like it did yesterday. I'm pretty sure the last mirror that I cracked was one of 7 years ago. And I don't want to wear those bullet holes no more. I want to kill my nightmare. And I've done nothing wrong to anyone. And I just want to get better, better than who I am, better than who I am, better than who I am, better than who I am. Moonlit river flows by gently, like a potion made from the earth. It is healing all of my inner bleeding, even though it's only pictures in my mind. And I hope my world don't crash in over me, just like it did yesterday. I'm pretty sure the last mirror that I cracked was from 7 years ago. And I don't want to wear these bullet holes no more. I want to kill my nightmare. Don't stick those pins in the dark that looks like me. I'm burning up. 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 I'm burning. Today I sat in a field of paper daisies. The gentle breeze made the world wave to me. The day has come with a gold ring wrapped around it. I think I might just bathe in the sun. I think I might just bathe in the sun. I think I might just bathe in the sun.
G'day, everyone. Welcome back. This week we welcome a new guest. Alex, welcome, mate.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, mate, Alex reached out to me through the social media, and he's got some cool theories and cool things he wants to discuss. But I'm curious, mate, how did you end up here? Where did the UTC find you? How did you find Unlocking the Code?
So I obviously, big fan of Joe Rogan and, a variety of other different podcasts. And I was just scrolling through one day, and the topic of I guess UFOs and other things caught my
Yep.
interest, and I was like, let's have a search, and up popped UTC. It was actually, I think, originally through Encounters Down Under that I was
Ah, yes,
looking at
Anthony.
that,
Yeah.
and it popped up in a podcast, and I was like, oh, UTC, what's that? So I had a quick look, and yeah, that was probably just over a year ago, and
Wow. Okay.
yeah, so I've been following it for quite a while,
Excellent,
and
man. Well, thank
yeah,
you very much for reaching out, mate. I really appreciate it. We got some interesting things to discuss.
yep,
Alex sent me some notes, which I appreciate. So I made some counter notes, and we got what do we got on the agenda, mate? We got dinosaurs, we got mammals, we got the pre-cataclysmic timeline, we got the moon, we got all sorts of things to look at.
mm,
But you started with your with about dinosaurs. You started talking about warm blooded. You started talking about did they survive? Also, the time frame they were here, right?
mm.
So, why don't you expand for the listeners on what your thoughts are on that topic?
Sure. So, as everybody is probably well aware, dinosaurs existed for a fair chunk of time. I think it was approximately 270 million years,
Yeah, give or
and
take.
give or take a few years. And you know, from all accounts, from you see different movies and different things, and they talk about what it was like for them in that time. The Earth was still sort of forming, in theory, but um, like you sort of think about what were the conditions like back then.
Mm,
What was it like for them? And then all of a sudden, you get to 66 million years ago, and an asteroid hits the Earth,
mm,
and wipes them out.
mm,
But the question was, and this is through research and bits and pieces that I've done, is that how much or how many of them were wiped out? How much percentage of that? And
yeah.
the answer comes back as about 75%. So what happened to that other 25%?
Mm,
Did they survive?
mm,
Did they continue to live on? And as the story goes, the Earth was blanketed by a cloud of dust for up to 2 years. I think
yeah.
they're estimating.
Yeah.
But is that really long enough for them to go extinct?
Well,
So that's yeah,
I wouldn't say so. And I think the deeper the research goes as well, Alex. I think when we come to this stuff, it's like, how do they know that it was covered in dust for 2 years?
exactly.
Right. If you're making predictions 65 million years ago, I think as the ability of the amateur researcher gets deeper and deeper with the interwebs, right, and we start reaching out like we're doing now and discussing
Mm,
theories and exploring ideas, a lot of this stuff's built on a better sand. So I wonder, how do they know that?
that's right.
Okay. Um, and what were the conditions like? And so I think that's the Yucatan, isn't it? So what's on
That's
the
right.
opposite
Yeah.
of the Yucatan? Where Southeast Asia, like if
Mm,
you go, yeah, like if we go Yucatan, that's somewhere down here. So yeah, it's basically our neck of the world. Basically, it's
that's right.
Australia and Asia and stuff like that. So you would think on the opposite side of the planet, there's the least amount of affected. Like it's still going to be cataclysmic,
That's
obviously.
right. Yeah.
However, some of the work that we've been doing with Max Egan's Earth's Forbidden Secrets, he had a whole section dedicated to dinosaurs in modern times, right? Like there's, draw me a dinosaur if you've never seen one. Okay.
That's
And
right.
then
Yeah.
there's carvings in India of dudes riding triceratopses and stegosauruses. And there's all these carvings of look like brontosaurus, you know what I mean? The big long necked ones and stuff like
That's
that.
right. Yeah.
Um, and then you go a bit closer to home, there's been constant stories and sightings of what we would call a pterodactyl in Papua
Mm,
New Guinea. Okay. So I mean, these flying creatures, these swimming creatures, and depending on what the species were on the opposite side of the planet, you would think that yeah, they did survive in some manner, only because of the story. Because it's the key, isn't it? Draw me a dinosaur if you've never seen one.
that's right. Yeah.
You know.
Exactly right. And then it leads into a whole other wormhole of dragons and other things like that.
Yes, it
So
does
it,
absolutely. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So that, I mean, look, yeah, you can look at it any way you like. And the one thing that I always come back to with regards to science and paleontology is that the majority of it's just theory anyway. There's
Absolutely.
no
Yeah.
there's no absolute fact. It's all
Mm.
just theories and
Well, again,
hypothesis.
paleontology is only there's the 1920s, 1930s as well. I think like it's not. It's actually barely 100 years old. That field of research. Same with archaeology. Like there's all these fields of research that their books are known as gospel when it's not. It's
That's right.
not. They've barely scratched the surface. Pardon the pun.
Yeah, exactly right. I guess the other thing, there's a lot more theories being thrown around at the moment, like you sort of alluded to earlier, is that dinosaurs may have been warm-blooded.
Yeah.
So if you look at that in that sense, what's to say if they were that they couldn't hibernate?
That's true.
Look, I know it's a stretch, but if you think about it, modern animals, bears and other creatures can do that. They can hibernate if they've got enough food, they're stocked up, and they've got somewhere they can rest. Then they can sleep for a few months. So, who knows?
Look, I mean, the other thing is too is that what percentage of them were covered in feathers, right?
Correct.
So like that's the other thing too. They actually found a feathered, and that goes back to the feathered serpent. You know what I mean? Like there's the stories of the feathered serpent, the serpent mythology as well, right? So it's like there's all these intersecting things. And Angus, one of the founding members of UTC, one of his favorite theories is the dinosaurs, and he likes to throw around lizard people, but it's and not to be totally crazy about lizard people, but if you've got 270 million years to develop, how far did certain species of that reptilian nature, what did they develop to? I mean, if we're to believe the intelligence and the what we supposedly know about the velociraptor, right, that's a highly intelligent creature if we're correct about what it does. I mean, again, this is all theory. We don't know.
That's
We found bones in the dirt, right? Everything there, everything past that really is fluff and guessing. And
it's funny that you allude to that, because I don't know if you recall, but many years ago when we were much younger, there was the Super Mario Brothers movie that explored the theory that dinosaurs evolved into man in a different alternative dimension.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And when you said it, it just got me thinking. I'm like, hang on a second.
I just had a flashback. I don't even know how old I was, but it was a lot.
That's right. I think I would have been 8 or 9.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's young, man. It's young. It had a big exactly. I had a flashback then, just hardcore.
But that brings up a whole other rabbit hole about evolution into like you said, the reptilian race. Maybe that happened. Who knows? But
well, to what state? Okay, there's one of the great sayings that was said here in the refinery, and I will give it to Angus. He has these Yoda moments, right?
Yep.
And he said, "What if everything is true? It's just a matter of time." Right? Because I mean, we can sit here and say the dinosaurs were around for 270 million years. We've got no idea what that means.
No, exactly right.
We've got no idea what that means, right? Considering modern civilization, we were riding horses 200 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, what can be done in 270 million years?
Yeah.
And, what do we know? I mean, and I know we started sort of riffing back and forth over Messenger about the size of things too. I mean, dinosaurs were big, mosquitoes were big, plants were big, right? So was it a different, how do you grasp that as well, right? Is it the same size continents with just giant stuff on it? Yeah. I mean, what I thought about later after we were talking about that is I went to Mullumbimby with Richard Patterson. We went on a bit of a tour looking at the Australian Stonehenge stuff and stuff like that. Yep. And he took me up into the mountains, and there is leftovers of the redwoods, right? And these trees, man, this one that's left over, and this one of the smaller ones, was 30 foot, right? That's how big the tree was. Now, the entire Australian landscape was covered in those 200 years ago, right?
That's right.
And again, we don't grasp that either. We're very much, our perception is can only be seen through what we can see, right? And in order to expand your mind, you've got to see outside that. But it's hard to, like, the amount of oxygen that would take for the plants to grow, insects, all that sort of stuff. You started talking about that. What were you thinking about that sort of stuff?
Well, it's hard to say, because the the science and everything that you read on, in books and online, and what we're told is that the oxygen levels were lower in prehistoric times, but I kind of think they might have been higher, because if you have dinosaurs and all those other creatures, they would have had to have been, because the amount of oxygen they would have required just to live would have been phenomenal.
Yeah.
So, and it leads into other avenues as well, with regards to, the moon and other things like that. But
we're going to get to the moon. Let's put a pin in the moon.
Yeah. No, I'm just like,
but you are right though. From a galactic neighborhood standpoint, where was the Earth in the galactic neighborhood? What other planets? I mean, there's so many rabbit holes, right? Or wormholes, right? So there's cultures that speak of a time when Venus wasn't here, right? And Venus rocked up, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's cultures that speak of a time when the moon wasn't here, and that's human cultures. So, where were we as far as a galactic neighborhood back then? Was the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter a planet? There's another different story, right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
Which opens up whole other different avenues of research.
Yes.
It's so hard that, and this is the thing, when you start, it's interesting when you're in the research hole. Dinosaur bones are cool, big stones are cool, you know what I mean? But then you start backing away and going, oh, hang on a minute. How did they build the road to move the big stone? Right?
Yep.
Or cool, there's dinosaur bones in the desert. What was that? What did that look like back then? Right? You the shiny objects fade and you start looking at the minutiae and the detail, because there's just a bland assumption, isn't there? It's like, oh yeah, everything was different. There was big lizards and stuff, and they ran around and ate things and stuff. And
Right.
yeah, it's all good, man. Don't worry about it. Then a big rock came and destroyed them, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah. and then you look at, from that point onwards, we're talking 66 million years. There's a lot of time for things to to change, to grow. Were there more impacts? I mean, you've mentioned in previous episodes of other impact sites that have been found,
absolutely,
underwater in different parts of the world. In particular, I guess, top of Australia.
Well, I think there's 19 major impact sites in Australia.
Yeah, that's right.
And like some of the craters that are in North Wolf Creek, they're massive.
That's right.
And there's 19 plus impact sites across the top end of Australia, and then I think one in South Australia, Victoria, something like that. And when did that happen, right?
Yeah.
And they're not real sure. I think they give different dates and different things. But then again, you want to talk about Australia, is that it's supposedly the oldest bit of exposed rock on the planet. So what is it saying? And as the picture develops, right, and these discoveries keep happening, and guys like ourselves keep connecting and we keep sharing information, the picture begins to reveal itself that, look, we really don't know, and it must be said too, I know we're going to talk about this later, that the day that we record this, David Grosh sat in front of Congress and said that aliens are real, UFOs are real, they have ships, they have bodies, they have a massive ship in front of Congress in America. That happened today, as we record this. You know what I mean? It's amazing that no one really cares, but
well, the ones that matter do. Like, I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to actually watch that yet. I did see something pop up on social media earlier, but
they haven't released the whole. At the moment, it's what I've seen is about 11 minutes, and it's sort of bits and pieces. Yeah, I'm waiting for it to filter through the groups, because that's what'll happen. You know what I mean?
That's right.
By tomorrow, the links will be up where the good stuff is. So,
yeah.
But even then, you know what I mean? Like, if I'd have said to you 5 years ago, someone's going to sit in Congress and say that, this is how fast things are evolving. I mean, 5 years ago, we didn't think dinosaurs were warm-blooded. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
5 years ago, we weren't sure they had feathers, right? But now some of them did have feathers. I mean, this is one that spun me out one night. Someone invented the dinosaur roar without ever hearing it.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Like, we don't even know that that's real, like we just don't.
That's right.
And if you think about the depths of the oceans, right, the size of these creatures, the depths of
Mm,
the oceans, the skies, could they have survived? I think they did, man. Right,
mm,
and I
yeah.
think evolution may have created a dragon potentially, or maybe dragons always existed,
Mm,
right? Because that's another mythical being that echoes throughout eternity,
that's
and it's the
right.
same
Yeah.
thing. Draw me a dragon
Yep.
if you've never seen one. And why does
Exactly
every
right.
dragon from Asia to Europe to the Baltic to the Mediterranean, why do they all look the same?
Exactly. Exactly right. Yeah. And that's one of those, you know, unending questions is, where, what were they? I allude to a video that I saw the other day. I'm pretty sure you posted it, of a guy saying that, dinosaurs were dragons because the word dinosaur wasn't, created until the
Yeah,
1800s or
that's
something
right.
like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. They invented the word dinosaur to account for the things that they were saying. Yeah,
exactly right. So up until that point, everything was a dragon.
exactly.
There are countless documentaries and movies that sort of, follow that line as well. There was one I saw a few years ago that basically said that the dragons were the ones that destroyed the dinosaurs. They cooked them and ate them essentially.
Yeah,
But
right.
again, that's Hollywood. That's just
Yeah.
going into that whole Hollywood thing. But
Well, I
you know,
saw, and I've never been able to find it since, but it was many, many. I was in oil and gas, so it was years and years and years ago now. But it was a documentary out of Europe where they were investigating in the Alps. They kept finding, and yeah, this is like early 2000s,
yeah,
right? And they were finding scratch marks, big scratch marks in the Alps. And the fireweed, which again is the same thing, fireweed is fireweed is
yeah,
fireweed across the world.
yeah,
They kept finding burnt out fireweed and all these weird scratch marks in the Swiss Alps, right?
yeah,
And it was just a matter of fact. They were just, this is what they were finding. And it was an indie documentary way back in the day.
mm,
But so, like I said, there's sightings of pterodactyls in Papua New Guinea
mm,
into the 80s, right?
that's right.
Um, and look, I've been in the jungles up there, man. There could be fucking anything up there.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm not. There could be anything in
mm,
those mountains. Like, who knows, right? I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah,
then you get to when you talk about evolution. Are we going to get to primate stuff? It might be a good
mm,
transition, but
yep.
the Yowies, you know what I mean?
Mm,
Like, I remember last year, I think was it last year, year before? I can't remember. Anyway, a couple of the boys had an experience, and they've actually gone back and had more experiences since then. We haven't done a follow up episode,
yep.
but I didn't really believe. You know what I mean? I was a bit of Bigfoot. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
there's so many things, right? But I sat here in the refinery. It was a different setup back then, but I sat here in the refinery. I looked those two boys in the eyes when they were telling their story, and they had an experience, right?
Mm,
And then I was working. I was doing a bit of dirt work with some blokes out here, and um, the old cowcocky. He's an ex Jackaroo, right? And I said, "What do you reckon about Yowies, man?" He's go, "Oh yeah, no, yeah, they for sure exist." Like, he
mm,
didn't even hesitate, right?
yep.
And this is the dyed in the wool, straight as Aussie bloke, right? And he's like, "No, no, for sure, yeah, yeah."
Yep.
Because when they used to drove the cattle from the north to the south, like they bring them into Roma and all that sort of stuff, there's a big period of bush, there's a big patch of bush out there somewhere that the cows, the horses, no one would go near it, and they would
Mm,
go around it for 3 fucking days in order just to not go through it because
yep.
no one would, and you basically just don't go in there.
Mm, yeah, exactly.
That's where they live. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like,
100%.
and then you start digging into that,
Mm,
and that's not insignificant either. So where do you start to place this stuff, right?
yeah.
Without, it's like it just gets weirder and weirder. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And look, I have no doubt that they exist. If you really want to go into the depths of things, I'm pretty sure when I was about 2 or 3 years old, I saw one.
Yeah.
I've got this
Okay.
vivid memory of this creature. Where I'd gone. We used to live on land up in the sort of central, where would you call it, just north of Newcastle area,
Yep.
and I've got this memory of this thing that was behind a tree, and I was 3 years old, and I was playing somewhere around it. There was this old bulldozer that was we used to clear roads and stuff on the property that we lived on, and I've just got this memory of this creature standing behind a tree looking at me, throwing little rocks at me. And then I picked up a rock and threw one back, and then all of a sudden, Mum steps out from behind the tree. Now, I don't know whether this is whether I've dreamed it or being a 3-year-old, it's just
Well,
one memory that I've got.
sounds like a cool memory, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So I would love to find out if it was actually true or not. I've looked into different things with regression hypnosis and stuff, but if it's real, hell, I
But
know they're
again,
real.
okay, so
Yeah,
we just go back
yeah,
to what we're talking about. If you've
yeah,
had
yeah.
that core memory from
Mm,
forever, right?
yep.
Explain to me what it. You know what I mean? If you've had that memory as long as you know, explain
Mm,
to me what that is without knowing what it is. As a 3-year-old, you
exactly
didn't
right.
know what it
Yeah.
was, right?
No,
So,
exactly right. No.
so you remember seeing a tall, hairy, yowie,
Yep.
ape being thing.
Yep.
You didn't know what that was when you were 3, but that's
No
what you
idea.
remember seeing. So you
Yep.
couldn't. There's no. If you think about memory, there's no
Mm,
core for you to be able
correct.
to join that together at that age. So look, I've
Exactly
not
right.
no doubt you had an
Yeah.
experience, man. The thing
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that I look, it's one of those ones that I didn't think about until I just started looking into it and started
Mm,
talking to people, right? And yeah, there is. Well, as you would know, in being a UTC listener, we work on the 1% rule here, man. You know what I
that's
mean?
right.
It's like, so if 1% of all the things that I've heard are true, they're real, right? And just some of the guys that I asked that didn't even blink, didn't even hesitate, right? Oh yeah, no,
Mm,
no, for sure, yeah.
yep. Yep. Definitely.
But even though you go to we found big cat paw prints when we were out at Jackals,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Um, there's actually a good photo of a black cat taken not that long
Mm,
ago. I saw that in one of the groups actually. I
yeah.
think it was here in Queensland, I think. But there's black cats up and down the east coast from Victoria to Queensland. That's been a
Yep.
story since the early 1900s.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got stories around here as well. Exactly
Yeah,
the same thing.
yeah,
Yep.
exact same story. It's the same story
Yep.
that echoes and echoes and echoes,
Mm,
right?
mm.
Um, so, well, did you have anything else about the dinosaurs? I mean, the thing is, we just don't know, do we? Right?
That's right. Yeah. It's one of those open-ended subjects you could just talk about for hours and hours. But I mean, I guess moving on from dinosaurs and into megafauna as well, there's other animals that existed, within that time period of between 66 million years ago and now, or up to, 15, 20,000, 30, 40,000, 50,000 years ago.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, there was a giant wombat
So
not that long ago down
that's
here
right.
that,
Yeah.
that had Recce Day. Like that.
Yeah.
Giant
Yeah.
wombat, a
And
wombat the size of a van.
that's right. Yeah. And there's so many, the giant emus, and there was giant, goannas. And I remember seeing a skeleton in the Newcastle Museum as a kid. And it was huge. It's this massive, 3 or 4 meter long goanna, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
See, I
giant
mean,
kangaroos.
the thing
Yeah.
is, I spent a fair bit of time in the Northern Territory. I've seen 2.5 meter long goannas. Right,
Mm,
I've
yeah.
seen big, big lizards, man. Like they in some of the national parks, there was a couple of them, and they would easily been 2 meters long,
Yeah.
big. Like they stood 3 foot off the ground.
Yep.
If they stood up straight, they would have stood 3 foot off the ground, but they sort of squat.
Yep.
And if you left your food, there was like 2 or 3 of these buggers. They'd come and steal your chicken. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
That's right.
and you're not going to fight a 2.5 meter lizard, mate.
No chance.
Take the
I
chicken,
mean,
man. It's okay. You can have
that's
it. It's all
right.
right. It's
Yeah, you
totally
can
fine.
have it. It's so good.
You know.
Yeah. I'd rather you
So
take my chicken than my child.
that's right. And this is the thing. We pretend like these things don't exist. I mean,
Yeah.
there's Sweetheart in Darwin, right? That crocodile's 40 foot long, man.
Yeah.
There's her Sweetheart. She's been stuffed, and she's in the Darwin Museum. That crocodile is
It's
massive, man.
big.
Like it's so, and also you want to talk about more sort of marine life at the moment.
Mm,
But what takes bites out of orcas, man?
yeah.
Considering orcas kill great white sharks, why do
Yeah.
they find something that's taken a bite out of an orca every now and again?
Exactly right. Yeah. And I've seen those videos and the photos, and you're just like, what could be big enough? Like
What
we're
is
talking
taken?
about
Yeah,
giant great white sharks or possibly the megalodon. Who knows? Like,
that's right.
the ocean is a big unexplored place.
Less than
And
5%. Yeah, less than
exactly right.
5%. Yeah, we know
Yeah.
more about our near Earth space than we do about the ocean.
Exactly.
But I mean, if we start to move into the mammals, the story is we evolved from the shrew. Like, I mean,
That's right.
that that sounds pretty thin, man. You know, like
Yeah,
it's very thin, right?
yeah,
It's everything evolved from like there's a little, you know. So what's the story that when the asteroid came, there was a little rat
mm,
chicken looking thing running
yeah,
around and it survived, and then tickety bickety boo, you know, abracadabra, primates.
yeah, yeah,
I just don't buy that. I don't. There's holes in the evolutionary story.
mm,
I mean,
mm,
you want if you want to talk about Darwin, I looked into Darwin and I just put it down after a while because he didn't really
yeah.
do anything or go anywhere. Um, and his theory got adopted because he knew people in
That's right.
high
Yeah.
places, basically.
I mean, and looking at the evolutionary chart for that the shrew and moving into, like, if you look at it the way that it's set out, it evolves into modern primates. So we're talking
Yeah.
gorillas and chimpanzees.
Mm.
But where do we come in? Where's our evolutionary chain? Why
Mm.
is it not? Look, the only thing that we've got is that we've evolved from a species of chimpanzee or something along another form of primate
Mm.
over the last X amount of million years to what we are now.
Mm.
But where did they come from?
Yeah.
Did they evolve in from this same animal, or is it something different that
Yeah.
doesn't really tell you?
Yeah. Yeah. There's holes, man. Like I say,
That's right.
you if you believe the doctrine, then you go, okay, cool, I can go on with my life. However,
Mm.
I think it sounds like you're a bit like me, mate. You grab a bone, and it's like, oh, hang on a minute. No, 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 no. What does that mean? No, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And you end up nowhere, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or you end up, look, the thing is there's two sides to it, right? So does evolution exist? Yes. Okay.
Mm.
Does
100%.
evolution exist? Have we observed evolution in primates since we've been observing them? Yes, we have. However,
Mm.
did they evolve because we're observing them and they were observing us? That's the thing, right? So
That's right.
if you're trying to hide from the monkeys using a boom and a camera and a tripod and all that sort of stuff, and then all of a sudden the monkeys start using sticks because they see
Mm.
the skinless monkeys using sticks, right? So there's a question there of the observed evolution we have had. Is that because we were there? You know what I mean?
That's right.
Um, so there's that, so it's like, and it's hard. Like it's hard.
Mm.
How do you place that? But then you've got what's that? That morphic resonance, right? So you've got
Mm.
was it the Galapagos Islands where the monkeys started cleaning the coconuts,
Yep.
and then the monkeys on the island 10 k's away, all of a sudden started cleaning the coconuts, right? So there's that collective consciousness thing there as well.
Yeah.
Is that part of it, right? But where did they come from? It's an interesting question.
Mm. That's it. And I think there's no real answer. Like the big question of all of this, what happened, and we simply don't know. It's all speculation at this point.
Mm.
And that's what I guess they still refer to as the missing link.
Yeah.
Where's the link between, you know, when we first, whatever life form we came from, and now, or
Mm.
or up to a few million years ago.
What was it? So Lucy is 3.2 million
Three.
years old.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 3.2. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Um,
but then you've got the footprints. Have you seen some of those footprints coming out of the Mediterranean and Turkey? Like they're
yeah.
saying footprints are 5 million, 6 million years old.
Mm,
They are. They look like a human footprint or a larger human footprint, right? So
that's
it's
right.
like, what part of the evolution, And again, how I mean, how do you get that too, though, right? How did a
Yeah.
footprint stay? Like, what was the event that
Mm,
took place for that footprint to stay where it was? You
yeah.
know,
And
it's
it opens up a whole can of worms with whole different things. Like they talk about the period of time that it takes for something to petrify. Like,
that's an unknown.
yeah,
That's it's not real.
exactly.
It's not because I looked into that. I looked into that because I was out west and I used to manage these yards and it was so boring. So I started. It was just me out there, right? It was just someone holding the fort. So I started exploring the bush around it. Basically,
Yeah.
said put a radio on the door and said, "Hey, if you're here, let me know." And I was gone. And anyway, I found this massive petrified tree. I've actually got a piece of it
Mm.
in the box here,
Yeah.
and it was huge, like the biggest bits of petrified stone I'd ever seen. Right, and it was massive. Like the tree would have been 3 or 4 foot, and it was long. Like there was 30 meters of all this broken up petrified wood. And I'm like, that's weird that's that big. Like, how did that happen? And you start looking into the petrification process. It's like, oh yeah, we think that it happens between 100 years and 1,000 years,
Mm.
or certain environmental factors.
Yeah.
It's like 15 pages of fluff to say, look, we really don't know, right?
Yeah.
you know, we just find it, and we try and carbon date the dirt around it, and maybe that's accurate. But even carbon
Yeah.
dating has its flaws, like,
Exactly right. And that's the thing with a lot of the timelines is that there really is no definitive answer.
no.
If I mean, look, let's just for argument's sake say that those footprints were in clay,
Mm,
or something that was soft, and all of a sudden you have an event where extreme heat is applied. What happens? Everything sets. We're
mm,
talking about pottery essentially. Creating
mm, yeah, firing and
firing
killing.
it. Yeah, so it's over a couple of hours. So that could be a possibility. Who knows? But again, it's just there's so much.
But why is there only one? You know what
Exactly
I mean?
right. Yeah, exactly. It could be anything. So yeah,
So I mean, so where did you want to go as far as the mammalian stuff? Because it's hard that, I mean, you want to get into primate evolution. You've got different types of hominids.
yeah,
I think the last time we checked here at the UTC was 24 different types
yeah.
of hominids. But even then, some of those hominids are like a pinky bone or a jaw,
Mm,
and then they've extrapolated an entire being out of that small
that's right.
thing, which is just, that you sort of, you're playing with yourself a little bit there. You know what I mean? Like, to
That's
try and
right.
say that it's an entirely different species. You don't know that.
That's right. And look, I went in to try to do some research about that today, and I could not find anything online. It was just I googled, um, different species of hominids, and it came up with like five,
Yeah.
the ones that they can actually prove. The rest of them that they supposedly, have are not there. They're not even doing anything about it. So I think it comes back to that. Are they just making stuff up just for the sake of it? Just because we found a bone that's slightly different. Well, your bone compared to my bone could be slightly different too.
That's right. We're
So
different shapes, different sizes, that sort of stuff. Same
exactly right.
species, but
Yeah,
different heights and builds and whatever
mm,
else, right?
that's right.
There's only certain factors that, male or female, when
Mm,
you're a skeleton. And look, that's the other thing too. I mean, you want to talk about skeletons? The Paracas skulls are
yes.
conveniently left off that as well, right?
Yeah.
And I'm yet to see a Paracas body. Okay, I've been
Correct. Yeah.
putting that out there, and I haven't had anything. And I've done a little bit of research myself, and it's like, no, there's all about the skulls.
Mm,
So they just found fields of skulls, but there was no skeletons, right?
yeah. That's
And
right.
then they're not in the hominid record, but they
No,
obviously have to be. There's hundreds of them, right?
that's right. Yeah.
And they're a different species. They're not human, right? Well, they're hominid, but they're not
Mm,
Homo sapiens sapiens, so to speak.
that's right. Yeah.
And you can't leave out the giants, man, right?
No,
I mean, and
definitely
I
not.
and I there's another one. Yeah, he's giants. Oh yeah, no, there was giant. No, no, hang on a minute. The giant story echoes through every single indigenous culture all over the planet,
Yeah.
right? There's stories and stories and stories and stories of giants, right? But then if you start taking some of the Stella and the Sumerian, the pictures in the Sumerian clay and all that sort of stuff, like, there's small beings and there's big beings, and we, oh no, that's just them
Mm,
worshipping their gods. No, well, hang on a minute.
yeah.
What if that wasn't them worshipping their gods? That was them. That's what happened. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think the stretch with everything is just ceremonial, or it's worshipping deities, or it's used for sacrifice or ceremonial bullshit, right?
Mm,
I don't know about what you think about this stuff, but I think it's a bit more literal, right? I
yeah.
think the story is the story, and they carved or they drew what they saw,
Yeah.
right? You know what I mean? Like,
Mm,
I don't see why there's anything controversial about that, apart from
no.
it upsets the modern narrative,
Yeah, pretty much. And look, as you were sort of saying, like it's in every culture across the
Mm,
world. You know,
mm.
the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians. You know,
In
even in
Europe as
the
well, man. In
yeah, in
Europe as
Europe,
well.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yep,
I
it's
think
there. And
Hugh Newman and I can't remember the other guy's name, but they did it as a bit of a goof to see whether there was
mm,
any evidence of giants throughout like England and Ireland and France and all that sort of stuff. And
yep,
then they released a book last year.
yes, right. And that's the thing. Like, is I think if you actually dig into it, you know, that little bit more, you'll find that there are stories and there is information, there is evidence that these
Mm.
were that were giants, and even in Australia.
Yep, absolutely.
You
Yep.
know, there's cave paintings and all kinds of things. And I think there's, you know, to do with the modern narrative, you know, are they covering this up for any particular reason? They just don't want us to know. They're afraid that it won't align with the religious beliefs or, you know, the whatever it is that they're doing.
I think it's a bit of a D or the above there, mate. It's
That's
interesting.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's fascinating. I'm talking to Loomis tomorrow morning, and our conversations are going to overlap. So I'll release these ones back to back, and
Yeah.
because it'll be interesting to see Loomis's point of view, and after we have our discussion, because we're going to talk about that as well.
Yeah.
Are they covering it up on purpose? And you would have to think maybe, right? You would
Mm,
have to think there's too much evidence of it, right? I mean, you want to get down to Australia, they destroyed everything, man. Like they
mm,
destroyed Stonehenge, they destroyed any evidence of city centers which the indigenous had. They
yeah.
destroyed, you know what I mean, like any of the agriculture, and like
Mm,
now they're painted to be a nomadic tribe, which they just weren't. Right? This
no.
was there sections of the indigenous that were that, yeah, absolutely,
Mm,
right. But there was definitely sacred centers, city centers, sacred places and spaces, and agriculture and all that sort of stuff, right? But
that's right.
they destroyed it all down here,
Mm,
either on purpose or through how they manipulated the convicts that were here. Basically, they said, if you find anything, we're going to take your land back.
yep.
That's a real easy way to people just destroy it, and not tell anybody,
Yeah.
and that's what happened, right?
Yep.
But also down under as well, and it reflects across the globe. Like there's evidence in Sumeria of like carvings that have got faces scratched out. There's that echoes in Egypt and Babylon and all that sort of
Mm,
stuff. Like they were trying to delete something,
that's right.
right? But on the flip side of that, it also seems that they were trying to find something as well,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And I think we're getting to the cataclysm, right?
yeah.
The reset button, the
That's right.
12,800 years ago, right? What
Yeah.
happened? What was actually truly going on
Mm,
before then, right? And what did the world actually look like before then is another
yeah.
very interesting question. Um, I suppose the only other thing I wanted to ask you about the mammalian stuff, where do you sit on the ET intervention? Do you?
Yeah. Look, I always try to look at things from a balanced perspective,
Mhm.
but I definitely believe in some way that there was ET intervention there. It can't
It makes
really.
sense.
It does make sense, and especially like if we go back to that missing link and the evolution of everything. I think there probably were, and you know, obviously evidence of this. There probably were native species of
Absolutely.
Homo sapiens.
They
They that's
adapted the
right.
strongest species or something along
That's
those
right.
lines.
Yeah, but I also believe that there was ET intervention to essentially govern. You know, kind of like what we have now, and I mean this in that with the most respect to everybody, but I do believe that the white man was created as that sort of race to oversee everything and sort of manage a lot of stuff. If you know, or sort of
So
say, for instance, yeah,
you're sort of prescribing there to Anunnaki, gold,
yeah,
slaves,
yeah,
mining, that sort of stuff.
correct. Yeah, yeah. So essentially, yeah, look, and I won't go down that rabbit hole just yet, but
No, no.
it's it's the only real thing that makes sense.
And
You know,
and again, if you think, well, how can how are we doing what we're doing now, mate? Right?
that's right. Yeah.
How did our prefrontal cortex and our brain stem, and like when you there's a whole heap of stats that are in an episode. I've been doing this for years, man. So some of
Mm,
the
mm.
stuff is gone, but there's an
Yeah.
episode somewhere in the back catalogue somewhere where it's something like the Homo sapiens sapien, right, which is actually an evolution of a Homo sapien if you think about it,
Yes.
okay,
Yep.
is we evolved, we accelerated in the last million years apparently, and it was mainly to do with our brains and our prefrontal cortex and how to communicate and stuff like that.
That's right.
I mean, there's the stoned ape theory, which I think it could assist, right? I mean, psychedelics are very profound.
Yep.
And if a monkey found, well, I mean, but then, you want to have a giggle one day, look into the animals that get high, man. Like
Yeah.
jaguars get high, deer get
Yep.
high, all sorts of animals.
That's right.
Dolphins, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Elephants
we're all,
get drunk.
yeah,
You know.
Elephants
Yeah.
get drunk. Cockatoos get, well, I've seen cockatoos get drunk. They fall out of the
Yeah.
tree. You know what I mean? So, I think there's multiple levels, right? The other thing I was thinking about this was a different conversation I was having the other day about this, whereas it's like, oh no, it might have been a podcast I was listening to. Skeptico, I think, Bruce Fenton. Might be worth looking into Bruce Fenton's work,
Yep.
Alex. Okay. He has a good theory 780,000 years ago of the alien intervention, which basically says it crash landed here in Australia. That's the Australite tektite and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Look up Skeptico. Talk to me later.
Yeah, sure.
But long story short, yes, there was. Well, I mean, it's the indigenous story, which I'm sure you know, mate. The seven sisters of the Pleiades got chased by the three brothers of Orion across the stars. They landed here. Battle. And that's why there's I think the pyramid culture is potentially the Orions, whereas the spiritual scientific culture is the Palladians, and that's sort of the split we see across the world as well. The seven sisters represent the seven nations, represent the seven species of human, which we basically have here now. It makes sense. There was some sort of intervention, but maybe do you think? So you think there was a hominid species already here and they adapted, or do you think maybe like the Neanderthal might have been a bung experiment or something? You know what I mean? Like
if you go back into evolution, and just say for argument's sake, the Neanderthal did evolve, from earlier primates.
That was
and
the
so
natural
on.
evolution.
That was the natural evolution. And if you then go into the other indigenous cultures that could have sprung up from that, so we're talking, African cultures, we're talking Indian cultures, or Australian Aborigines and things like that, the native cultures that have been here for many, many thousands of years. That could be the factor that, and when you go down the line of, when you talk about the Bible and God creating man in his own image sort of thing, is that them alluding to the alien intervention of the gods creating man and so on, splicing the DNA of, the species that are already here, and then putting them with their own DNA and creating modern man.
And then you've got whatever. The Nephilim technically being the actual gods, but they may have been, not from around here, offspring or offspring of the gods. You know what I mean? Like these are the different, and you start to get into some of the stuff from, we're going to look into Eridu tomorrow with Loomis, and that's the original Sumerian city. So I won't give that too much away there, but you got to talk about the Sumerian kings list. You can't leave that off the table.
No.
The pharaoh list in Egypt, right? Where these pharaohs, these kings ruled for 30,000 years. Like, and the historians are like, oh yeah, no, this pharaoh's right. No, the rest of it's just bullshit. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Which is the cognitive dissonance with that stuff sort of drives me a little bit crazy, because it's like, how can you leave that out, right? If everything else is true, but that's not, you can't cherry pick your data. Like
that's right. And it's, it comes back to that whole thing about science. Science is there to try and, challenge the narrative and challenge the theories to come up with ultimately, a solution to the problem, but they're not doing that. They're basically saying this is what happened and that's it.
Well, look, I think when we are escaping the current situation we exist in, but I mean, we've got to trust the science, mate. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
100%.
Science is not science anymore. I don't think. I think it's been but there is hope because there's guys like us, you know what I mean? And we've put in our thousands of hours, right? We
Mm.
are, by definition, subject matter experts on multiple different things because of the time we've actually put in to looking at the
Yep.
various theories and because I'm the same, mate. I don't subscribe to anything. I will look at the alternative. I will find the alternative, right? It's like, oh, I
Mm.
think this is true. What's the alternative to this, and does that weigh against that?
Yeah.
And I end up somewhere wherever I end up,
Mm.
depending on what evidence is presented to me. But I think, yeah, look, the intervention thing, it makes sense. It's just how and when. I mean, I don't know whether I posted the video to the page. It might have been one I couldn't post, but there was a guy. It was about in the 1920s, someone got access to the Vatican library, which wouldn't we
Mm.
all? What would you do to
Oh.
get in there, mate? What would you do?
Had a field day.
What would you do to get in there? I just wall myself in there. I'm not coming out.
Yeah.
So I'll see you in a couple of years.
Mm.
Now, apparently he found like there's 9 missing books of the Bible, and it's exactly what you say. It's the joiner between because
Mm.
God came to earth and da 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 da. There's a whole big patch of the story missing there that is in the Vatican Library, which is basically them saying that they came, they modified us, and blah 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 blah. Right? Um, it's interesting as the last sort of since I've been doing the show, the last 7 years, things that would totally sound crazy to me 8 years ago just don't anymore because
Mm.
it seems to be so much weirder, and it's so weird that I don't think we'll ever really grasp it.
That's right.
Without some sort of well, unless the US actually show us their craft and their alien beings, then that's the next step. But I mean, that could all be
That's
disinformation as well.
It could be as well, and that's the other thing you've got to consider is that it could just be all smoke and mirrors just to create a story and get people talking about things.
Yeah.
Just
What else is going on while they're doing that Congress hearing?
exactly right. Yeah, what's going on behind the scenes there?
What's the
It's
left hand doing?
That's right. But I mean, I think in the last sort of, like you said, 5 to 10 years, there's been a lot more people coming forward. A lot more documentation on a lot more people, putting their theories out there. We're talking like the Graham Hancocks, the Randall Carlsons,
Yeah.
all of those guys that are doing all this research, and they're credible people,
Mhm.
with qualifications and all of these things, and they're coming up with alternative theories and they're proving things that to be, somewhat correct, but they're challenging the information and they're doing
Yeah,
exactly
challenging the
what we're
narrative.
doing.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely
right.
we are.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're just students.
exactly.
We're just students of those guys. You know what I mean? Like, and we have the ability to take all of their information and with podcasting and YouTube and assimilate all of that data and draw our own conclusions. However, what I'm finding is that most of us are pretty much coming to the same conclusion.
That's
Like
right.
how many different people I talk to without actually prompting them or um it's like it's like we're landing on the common sense stuff. I think
Mm.
I think our generation, we're probably roughly the same age, I would say, by the looks of it, you
Yep.
old bastard. um um however, our generation, we still have that common sense critical thinking where we're not going to
Mm.
we don't like bullshit, right? However, we're also very open as well. So it's like we
Mm.
can hopefully see more through some of the deception and and I think it's just the 1% rule, man. You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
Like it's like just work on the 1% rule. It's realistically possible that 1% of what they're saying is true. And if 1% of what they're saying is true, then but then you take the actual evidence, right? The Australia's Stonehenge, you take
Mm.
some of the things that we're finding in Australia in the middle of the bush and stuff. Like it's crazy, right? I mean,
Mm.
and there's a story developing of pre-cataclysm, mate, which I suppose leads
Yeah.
us into our next topic. Now, you
Mm.
sort of touched on a what I thought I'd bring up, right? Because you would know that 72,000 years ago, the super volcano with the near extinction of humans. So basically, yeah, I'll just bring it
Mm.
up so you can have a
Yep.
look at
Sure.
it. And this is actually from this is from Randall, more Randall than you can handle.
Yeah.
So this is his this is his timeline that he put together, right? So catastrophes
Mhm.
even the time of man, for those that are listening, the tempo of global change. So he went from 150,000 earliest modern human skeleton remains 160,000 years ago. I
Mhm.
believe now that's out to about 300 and something thousand, I think,
Mm. Yep.
400,000 maybe. I know, and it's probably on the page somewhere, but they found an older skeleton in Europe than they've found in Africa. And I think it was about 350, 400,000 years, supposedly.
Yep.
So since this graph has been done, it's at another 200,000 out here somewhere, right?
Mm. Yep.
So the salient, and see the in the green, right, which I thought was very cool, is he's putting the celestial the cycle, right? So
Mm.
64, 80, 12, 960, and 25, 920, right, which is the cycle of time, right, which
Yep.
we are currently at the end of as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, 72,000 years ago in Sumatra, Indonesia, just north of us, um, basically they say that I think the human population total got down to about 10,000 people
Yep.
globally, right?
Mm.
So I think the pre-cataclysm timeline for humanity, I would say, is 72,000 to 12,800, which
Mm.
is still 59,000 years.
That's right.
Okay. But that got me thinking, what was going on prior to 72,000?
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
this is when you start. And I think at all times, so I sort of thought to my, here's my little, I got my big globe up there, but this is my little research globe. My daughters
Yep.
love it. They're like,
Yeah.
can we have the bouncy ball? No, it's for research. I'm like, but it's a bouncy ball. No, it's
Mm.
not. Okay, listen, just so if we go, Sumatra is basically there, right?
Mhm.
So if we go the other side of that, guess what is on the exact opposite?
Yeah.
South America,
Yeah.
high continent of South America. So, like, obviously, it's a mass extinction event, but that
Mm.
would be the place to be. Okay,
Yeah.
if we talk
That's
about the
right.
dinosaurs, we talk about you flee to
Mhm.
the whatever it is, the Holy Land or whatever you want to call
Mm.
it, right? And the stuff coming out of South America, just almost day by day, is unbelievable, right? The
That's
the
right.
highways and the pyramids and the
Mm.
cities and the stuff that they're finding with the lidar is crazy. So that sort of put
Yep.
me into a bit of a space. It's like, well, hang on a minute, maybe after the cataclysm, we went to South America,
Mm.
right? Or humans went to South America, then they built that culture and they went out from there, right? And then
Yep.
it's like, so yeah, so let's have a look, right? So you've got the super extinction 72,000,
Yep.
Heinrich event 6, event 5. See, there's all these ones that happen in a bit of a bunch. Heinrich event 4, final extinction of Australian megafauna at 26,000 years ago, okay,
Mhm.
which was another ice age there, okay.
Yep.
And that's when I think we had, that was the giant wombat. It would have been the giant iguana.
Yep.
I think there was a cat as well, wasn't there, or a dog?
Yeah.
Not a. It was a dog, wasn't it? It was a big dog, I think.
Yeah. I'll just have a quick look at the photograph I've got here, and I've sort of got a few different things. There
Mm.
was a giant possum.
That's might be it.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And this possum was bigger than a thylacine. The
Yeah.
Tasmanian tiger.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the kangaroos. I think it was the diprotodon. Is that the one that was the
Yeah, it
the
could be
wombat?
the
Yeah.
wombat. Yep. Yep.
There was a giant goose looking thing that.
Yeah, big birds and stuff, right?
Yep.
And
So
that's
there
only
was all kinds
20.
of stuff.
That's only 30,000 years ago,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
And what caused that? Probably one of the big comet impact craters somewhere on the Big Brown Land. Like,
Mm.
and then from 23,000 to 12,900 seems to be a little bit of stability, right? And
Mm.
then at 12,900 at the other end of the cycle, basically that's the end of the world, right?
That's right.
That's it. Okay.
Yep.
But what happened in 59,000 years, considering we went from horseback to rocket ship in
Mm.
300, right?
That's right.
And what are these echoes? You go back to the story is the story is the story is the story, man, right? I mean, the
Mm.
the pre-cataclysmic timeline is so fascinating, because I think that my personal opinion of timelines is that they're all askew. I don't think any
That's
of them
right.
are
Yeah.
correct.
Mm.
You look at carbon dating, you look at, I mean, even the stuff coming out of Turkey, they found another city, right?
Mm.
I even got a new notebook for you, Alex, mate. I went to do some more research and I've run out of pages. But there's another. I've got like four of them in here, man. There's pages and
Mm.
pages and pages. Can't remember. It's not Kaharan Tepe. Kaharan Tepe, Göbekli Tepe. There's another one,
Yeah.
another Tepe that they
Yeah.
found.
I was watching something about it the other day.
Yeah. It's on the list, right?
Yeah.
There's so many things on the list, but we will get there.
Mm.
At UTC, we're going to do a bit of a
Mm.
feature on them. But yeah, that's 15,000 years, they reckon now, right?
Mm.
And how long before they find a city under that dirt over there?
That's right.
Which then will just blow Eridu out of the water, right? By
Mm.
times two or times three.
That's right. The other thing you've got to consider as well, looking at all these ancient civilizations that are going, sort of 10, 15,000 years, that whole time, and again, watching a documentary recently on the indigenous cultures of Australia and where they came from, that we're talking 50, 60,000 years ago. They're
Absolutely.
moving down from, Papua New Guinea across. There was a land bridge apparently
Mm.
to the top of Australia, and then they came down. And about, I think it was, they were going to say about 30, 40,000 years ago, the oceans rose
Yep.
and they got cut off,
Yep.
leaving them to where we are now.
But then there's the out of Australia theory as well, mate,
That's
right? People
correct.
go the
Yeah,
other way,
exactly right.
right?
Yeah, exactly right. And then look, when I heard you guys talking about it, it really got me thinking. And I thought, wow, it's possible,
Well,
definitely possible.
the Bruce Fenton's theory, but I don't
Mhm.
want to spoil that for you if you haven't looked into
Yeah.
it, because it's cool, right? Um, we did an episode, I think it's called Alternative Origin, right? So
Yep.
looking at back catalog, you get a pre-seed version, and then there's a documentary called 780,000 on YouTube that you need to watch, which
Yep.
is excellent. Okay. But it basically says Australia was where they modified the hominids originally.
Mm.
That's what they're saying, basically.
Yeah, there's also, so I don't know if you look at your little globe again. Actually, it's a lot easier to do it on Google Earth. But if you look at where um, the bottom of I don't know, it's not Australia, it's the bottom of South America. There's actually if you look at Antarctica and how close the continents are. If you're talking about the oceans rising,
Yeah.
a few thousand or 40,000 years ago, if you take them back down, there's almost a land bridge between Antarctica and South America.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
thought.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? Like that brings Antarctica into the fold.
Oh,
And
look, Antarctica is not out of the question, man,
no,
because one of the key things that I figured out, right, and I bet you now that they're doing their newest climate change push. I mean, it's only the third time they've told us the climate's going to end in our
that's
lifetimes,
right.
Alex.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
But, hasn't happened yet. But anyway,
No,
we're not poking modern beasts. We're in the rabbit hole.
that's right.
In through some of the research that I was doing, and there's actually another globe somewhere, another research globe. The ice chases. The ice chases the magnetic poles, man. Right.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter. Like if the magnetic poles could be anywhere on the planet. Okay.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
that, and the ice chases the poles. So at some point, Antarctica could have been free of ice at
That's right.
very,
100%.
and it was right
Mm.
and this is the whole point. You know how they said the ice caps were melting? Well, they're not.
Yep.
They're growing because
They're moving.
they're moving, right? And
That's right. Yep.
because the poles are moving. But when these things fall away, they keep finding big, massive trees and stuff that have been ground down by the ice. So, and it's like the Egyptians speak of a great land to the south. Now, I would suggest that's actually Australia,
Yep.
but it could be Antarctica, right? I
Mm.
mean,
That's right.
there's, but again, it's the same thing, right? So if we go back to the similar theory, because this is what it was. So if we take our little ball here, right? Here's America, okay?
Mhm.
So where are you going to run? If the impact's here, the opposite side and down underneath is Australia,
That's right.
right? So it's like we've got to think about us as a species, right? And if you got to remember that the Sumerians said, if we talk about the cataclysm, that they knew that the cataclysm that was coming was so bad that they fled the planet
Yep.
right? If they've got the ability to flee the planet, they've got the ability to scoot around the other side of the planet to avoid
Exactly.
the brunt of the
Mm.
cataclysm, so to speak, right? So it's like
Yes.
it's so fascinating, right?
It is, yeah, and that kind of, I guess, a little bit of a segue, if you don't mind me saying so, into that next topic that we sort of alluded to earlier, um, about the capitalism, and looking at the timeline that Randall's put forward, it really does sort of fit into that, that sort of 13 or 12,900 years ago. But you're also looking at the other timelines, that there were multiple other cataclysms in that
Yes,
time.
that's right.
So
Yeah, so
yeah.
it's not just, and that's sort of why I thought I'd bring that up, because it's like
Mm.
it's not just that one event, but humans are pretty, Homo sapiens sapiens are pretty plucky, man. Like we will
Mm.
survive, right?
That's right.
We will find a way. Um, but then again, you can't, you want to, we're down the rabbit hole. What about the ant people, man? Right?
Yep.
What about the species under the earth that came up to save
Yep.
some of these tribes in North America,
Mm.
took them underground for X amount of time and then let them back up to the surface, right? And
Exactly.
again, that's just a matter of fact story for them. That is their history. That's what
Yep.
happened.
Yep.
We want you guys to survive. Come with us, okay? And they stayed
Yep.
down there for a couple of years.
Yep.
Righto, you can go back to the surface now.
Yep.
Good luck, right?
Mm. Mm.
Because I mean, that's the other thing they keep finding, right? Is that these voids under the earth. Like we got no idea, man. Like we've only
That's right.
actually, I was at a good mate of mine, actually my good barber, Pat the bearded hippo. He's opening up a shop here at in Ipswich in Queensland. Where we're gonna do a
Nice.
bit of a sponsor deal
Nice.
when he
Yep.
opens up next month. But I was at his place and we were putting, we always wax and lyrical, and he put a one of these YouTube videos on where it's like how actually deep we've dug into the earth, and it's only like
Mm.
12 k's or something,
That's right.
right? Whereas the average thickness of the shelf is 73 kilometers. So haven't even, not even a seventh of the
Yeah.
way. So we've got no idea, right? I
No,
mean,
exactly.
I think I've been 3.5 k's underground, in gold mines and stuff like that, and that's weird, man. It's weird
Yeah.
down there. It's hot.
Yeah.
It's weird. You feel odd.
Mm.
You shouldn't be there. You know what I mean? Like we've got no idea what's under the earth, man. All the oceans, for that matter.
That's right. Exactly, and it's vastly unexplored as well. There's no, you get people going caving, and they fall into things. What are they found a cave? Something, I think it's in, is it in Thailand or Indonesia or something, that's like 26 kilometers long or something
Vietnam. That was
crazy.
Vietnam. Yeah,
Vietnam, yeah,
there
that's
was
the one.
one, and that's just like the classic story, right? There was a guy on a valley. He's looking across, and there's a cave over there, and then
Mm.
they go in the cut. Even it's got its own weather system, and it's got its own
Yeah,
biosphere, and it's got everything in there, and no one
yeah,
knew it existed ever, right?
exactly.
It makes me wonder. Me and the boys, when we're on road trips, we play the game Spot the Pyramid. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
and then it's like, how do you? No one's walked all this land, man. Like,
No.
obviously, our indigenous brothers and sisters are the closest that have,
Mm, mm.
but even they wouldn't know some of the cave systems and all the things that exist on
Yeah,
this big brown land as well. Like,
exactly
especially
right.
up and down the Great Dividing Range. I mean, what's hiding in there? Like,
Yeah.
when we went out west, Tenterfield, sort of between New South Wales and Queensland, like that national park there, God, it's amazing. But there's
Mm.
so much out there. Like you could disappear in there, like
Yeah.
and there'd be enough food and water and whatever you needed forever
Mm.
if that's
Mm.
if that's how you were, like
Exactly right. And the same with down where I am. We're right on the borders of the Kosciuszko National Park,
yeah,
and it's
same
a
thing down there.
massive area. There's so much out there. Um, you can drive through and you can see bits and pieces of it, but you get out into the wilderness, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like the valleys and the gorges and all the other things that are there. And like you were saying, spot the pyramid. Like I know of 5 in my local area.
Mm.
There's one that I was sort of mentioned in our chat, but that I can look directly at my window, and I'm looking at it.
Mm.
So
So do you know the
yeah,
bloke who owns the property?
no, you know what? Funnily enough, it's actually owned by state government. It's state
Oh,
government land, and this is the thing that makes me wonder is that it's state government land. It's actually got an indigenous name, and I won't say it because I don't want to sort of give it
no,
away.
no, that's okay.
But if you research it, there were artifacts found on this hill, on this particular mountain. You know, it's the shape of a pyramid. It's a very mellow one, but it stands out among all the other mountains around it, and you can see it from four different angles when you're traveling on the main highways. So if you're coming in from the south, you can see it from a certain point. If you're coming from the north, you can see it from a certain
So
point.
it is a marker.
It's a marker. It's highly visible. I mean, you have to get into certain high points to see it, but when you see it from that high point, you know it's there. So it's very interesting, and the fact that
So
it's
we got to sneak in and climb to the top and start digging. That's what we got to do. See if
correct.
we
They
get
well,
started.
like I said, they've found artifacts there. They've found ceremonial things. I'm not sure exactly what types of things, but it's been recorded, and
Mm.
you can Google it. So I'll send you the info later.
I mean,
So,
yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, look, all the listeners would know that Teotihuacan was a mountain that
mm,
looked like any other hill, and that's sort of
that's
where
right.
this comes from. I'm not saying
Mm,
that every hill is a pyramid, but
no.
there's a few out here as well on the west
Mm,
on the way to the Dividing Range,
mhm,
and it's like the same again, right? There's a couple that just are in the middle of nowhere. It's like, well, that
mm,
looks awfully pyramidal shaped to me.
yeah.
And yeah, it's there's not a lot of knowledge about them. Like
No.
it's fascinating stuff, mate. I mean,
Mm,
the pre-cataclysm timeline. I don't know where you want to go too much with that. I mean, I think we can just agree that it's out of whack, right? I
yeah.
don't think that
100%.
it's not accurate. I mean, carbon dating, whilst it is the best thing that we have, I know they've got that. What are they doing now? There's that they're using something magnet something. I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I can't remember what it's called now, but it's with carbon dating, the further back you go, the more margin of error there is, plus or minus. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not as it's again they write it in a book, and yeah, this happened 97,000.2 years ago. No, it
Yeah.
didn't. No, it didn't.
No.
You don't know that. You don't know that.
No.
Like I
Unless
get
you've
that
got a
you
time machine, you can go
yeah.
back and find it.
Look, I agree that you might be somewhere in the ballpark where it might have happened at
Mm,
that time, but I think with the carbon dating as well, and this is something that I have to pick that research up again. Actually, this is a problem, Alex. Man, I've got so many research rabbit holes, and then
yeah.
awesome dudes like you get in touch, and that sends me down a different track. And um,
Sorry about
however, no, it's not totally fine, mate. I really
that.
enjoy it, but it's
Yeah. Yeah.
hard. But when I started looking into carbon dating, so you're measuring coal, basically compressed coal. So it's
Yep.
like, where did they pull that coal from? And
Mm,
does cataclysm, if we talk about cataclysm, right? Does cataclysm affect the like back to petrification, right?
mm,
So
mm,
something petrifies in 100 or 1,000 or 2,000 or who bloody knows, really, right?
mm,
Um, I imagine a big rock hitting the planet. If they got a bit of coal from the bottom of that, it's going to be compressed higher than the coal that's found alluvially, somewhere
mm.
else. Like so,
That's
it's
right.
like even the measurement, they've just agreed that that is the standard of measurement,
Mm,
and that's basically it.
yeah.
And because how do you explain some of the U part as well, right? I mean,
That's right. Yeah.
we haven't even touched on U part, right? Because
No.
it's like there's a hammer at three hundred
Mhm,
thousand years. You know what I mean?
mm.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
There was something else. I think they dated it at what 5 million or
something
something
like that.
like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of clusters. I think it's like five
Yeah.
million, 3.3 million, and then there's like
Yeah.
300,000 years ago. But yeah, I think they found a chain at
Yeah.
3.3
Yeah.
in the strata,
Mm, mm.
which of course, due to our machines these days, we just destroy stuff. We don't
That's
actually
right.
see as much because we're
Mm,
processing it in a larger amount. So we've lost
yeah.
that. The chances of finding something like that anymore it's not
Yeah.
not very possible. However,
Exactly right. And we're left with the relics of Göbekli Tepe and
mm,
all those other things that we're digging out very, very carefully, which is great. But it doesn't really give you a good sense of what is under that.
No, that's right. And until we
Mm.
can date stone, we're not really going to know. Like, and until we
Yeah.
can date stone, which there's got to be a way. You would think there's got to be a
You
way.
yeah
You got to
yeah
be a
you
way,
would
whether
think.
it's magnetism or something like it's something to do with the sunlight. That the new technology, something to do with
Mm.
laser, sun, something that's gone. I'm not going to
Yeah.
even try and bring
Haven't
it
heard,
back.
yeah, I don't know. I haven't
Doesn't
even
matter.
heard about it, to be honest.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Let's
Yeah.
move on, mate, because
Yeah.
I know that you like the moon, and we like the moon around here. The moon,
Mm.
the
That's
moon, the
cool.
moon, the moon, the moon keeps coming back around, man. Like it doesn't.
Mm.
Um, Mine and Loomis's episode was a lot of fun. However, since I've done that, more and more people have gone, oh, well, what about the moon about this? What about the moon about
Mm.
that? So, my first question to you, because in your notes here, where did those moon facts come from? Where you said, like, I've got your stuff here. Let's have a look here. A day on Earth would only last 6 to 12 hours, 1,000 days
Yep.
in a year. Where'd all
Mm.
that stuff come from? Because I hadn't seen that before.
So when I was doing my research, I wanted to see what the difference on the Earth would be if the moon existed or if it didn't exist, and that goes back to pre-cataclysm. It goes back to the dinosaurs and everything else. And if you Google it, you just say, what would life be on? What would life be like on Earth if the moon didn't exist? And all the responses come back saying that the Earth would spin faster, not considerably, but enough to reduce the timelines of your average day, year, month, and so on. That the tides would be considerably different.
Well, yes,
Um,
of course. Yeah, that
yeah,
stands to
so
reason. Yeah. Yeah.
yep, so lower and much lower tides. You wouldn't have king tides and all those other things. The weather would be different as well. It would be a little bit more unstable. Um, and that, well, according to the information that I've got, that essentially trees and plants and everything would be limited to the ground. Okay, so animals and other things would be, you know, it would be difficult for us to survive, but we could do it. Essentially, we'd just be, a little bit different. But essentially, yeah, just Google everything. That's all I've done to come up with those theories.
Don't
So
forget DuckDuckGo, and remember to cross check
yes,
a couple of different
yeah,
search engines when you're doing your
yeah,
research, because that
which I have done. I've had a couple of different ones, and I started to make some more notes today when I was going through things. Uh, Actually, a few more different websites that sort of confirmed the information that I was looking for.
because I
So,
mean the thing is too,
but
man. I
as I
mean,
said
again,
earlier,
how do they know that? Right, that is just
that's right,
it is
exactly.
their best guess. That is, it's not
Yeah, yeah.
just because it's
So,
written on
and
a
what I did,
website.
as I said, exactly right. And what I did was, as I said, I had a little bit more research, and Googled, what would happen if the Earth spun faster. Gravity would be significantly reduced. Things things would weigh less. Um, you know, and I'm sorry, I'm just reading it as I go.
You're right, mate.
Um, the centrifugal force would be increased as well. So we would be able to, run around a lot lighter. We'd be able to bounce up and down, sort of thing. I think what do they say?
I
If
wonder what the
the Earth
magnetosphere would
was,
be like as well, because obviously the moon's locked in
yeah,
with the magnetosphere as well. So I
yep,
mean that would
yeah,
have to be surely have to be different as well.
that's right. And that was one of the things I wanted to sort of look at was how would our atmosphere be affected? How would the magnetosphere be affected? How would that affect the radiation of the sun? All those kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Didn't really allude to that much, but yeah. So the information I basically said that if the the Earth spun up to 17,641 miles per hour, the centrifugal force would overcome the gravity, and everything would be virtually weightless. So,
Yeah, right. So we'd spin off
mm,
basically. So we'd be
correct, yeah, yeah.
we would
We
literally
wouldn't spin out of control, but essentially, as we said before, the days would be shorter. You'd have over 1,000 days. I think they said something like, the days would be like 6 to 12 hours. So your year would be over 1,000 days, sort of thing.
there's
Yeah.
another. See, you're making the guys in the back of my head work hard in the filing cabinets back there, mate. There's another. There's a tribe, couple of tribes. One of the tribes in Africa that talks of a time when the moon doesn't exist. They run on a different
Yes.
calendar.
Yeah, that's right.
I wonder. I can't remember what their calendar is, but they run on a completely
Yeah,
different calendar. I can't
that's
remember
right.
whether it's longer or shorter. I can't remember
Mm.
what the deal is
Yeah,
with it. But there is a
and
few.
I,
There's a
and I,
few that run on their own calendar.
that's right. And I did dig into that a little bit a little bit more. And the, I think it was the Babylonians had a one of those stories when the moon didn't exist. And I looked at the Mayan calendar and a few other things, and I couldn't. I was trying to work out whether the calculations might have added up to the long count calendar, which it didn't. But so that sort of cancels that idea out. But if it
Mm.
did, you essentially have the whatever the long count calendar was, how many thousands of years that was,
Well, what
might
I
align with the fact that we have shorter days, longer
mm,
years.
mm.
So anyway,
Well, the oldest
I don't want to.
lunar. Yeah, so I got a couple of notes I might because after reading your stuff, right? So what about the magnetic poles? We spoke about that. I mean, how does that
Mm.
affect that? Um,
Well, the I guess the theory of that was that
oh, why only
if
life along the
yeah.
equator? That was the other question I had.
Mm, mm. I didn't really dig into that too much more.
Mm,
I think the idea was that if the poles are in a different space, essentially, and I sort of mentioned it in my notes that the poles would have been in a different position, which means the Earth would have spun at a higher angle, sort of thing. So sort of more to that 45-degree angle as opposed to 23.5, which it's currently at.
mm,
Which means the poles would have been further up and down, and then you know the ice caps would have been in a different place, essentially almost on the equator, sort of
yeah,
thing. So
yeah, yeah.
the Earth might have actually spun in a completely different direction to what it is now.
Yeah,
So,
see, and this is the magnetic pole thing is interesting, isn't it?
mm,
Like, I mean, how
that's right.
and look, the most probably one of the most concerning things, we run into discoveries here at UTC inadvertently is that I thought the poles were going like that, like they were still,
Mm,
but they're not. They're converging, which is a
mm,
bit of a concern. They're not.
mm,
They're not going opposite to each other. They're actually trying to meet each other, which is
mm.
a little concerning that they're doing that. And yeah, look, I'd
And it
because the equator, the equator, same thing again. There was the same set of research, right? The ice chases the poles, so the equator isn't the equator all the time. The equator is
no,
wherever the magnetosphere is weakest, right? Which
that's right.
which allows for more sunlight, more growth, blah 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 blah
Mm-hmm.
blah.
Yeah.
So entirely dependent on where the poles are as to where the equator would be anyway. You know.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And if you think about, if the poles can move significantly, if we go back to like, I think it was one of the ice ages, I'm not sure exactly which one, but the last one, I think, it sort of said that where the ice was pretty much on the equator. So
Yes.
that would make
Yeah.
sense that the poles would be there, and the Earth still stays in the same place. Essentially, it
It's just
doesn't
the
sort
the
of tip on its
magnetosphere just
side.
moves around. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So everything would change there, and that could, explain, quite a lot of stuff to do with the cataclysm and other things. But
And Antarctica could explain Antarctica. There's a lot of
that's
stuff.
right.
That's sort of where I got to. As I say, the other ball that's somewhere probably in the cupboard over there has got
Mm.
all drawings on it because I actually did
Yeah.
the
Right.
I did that because here's the ice shelf. So where would the ice be
Mm.
on the other side, which actually freed Antarctica up? The ice would have been free
That's right.
floating in the ocean,
Mm.
potentially.
Yeah.
So do you subscribe to the impact theory with the moon, or where are you with is the moon parked there, or where do you sit with that?
I look at all of the above. Like I don't cancel anything out. I think it'll be silly to do that because there's so many different theories about it. Why prescribe yourself to one? I mean, it also from the perspective of if I'm wrong about something, then I look like an idiot, sort of thing. So have a couple of different theories about it, and that's essentially where I've landed. Over the last few weeks of through my research and so on, is that there could be a couple of different things that have happened. That the moon was parked there deliberately to balance out the Earth to make sure that life could survive and so on, and it could be a a giant spaceship,
Yep,
that was
satellite ship or something
driven in
like that.
there
Yeah.
and just stuck there, in that specific spot. Because if you go back to the age of the dinosaurs and the way that science talks about the moon, and it would have been considerably closer to the Earth, And we
Theoretically,
talk
yeah.
about, yeah, and that's what, science tells us. If that was the case, there would have been, you know, massive tides. That there would have been tsunamis all the time. There would have been earthquakes and all these different things that happen if the moon was closer. And now it's in the perfect spot, so everything's fine. How does that make sense? Like it.
That's the issue, right? The issue
That's
with the
right.
moon, and I sort of wrote that difficult to explain the weight, the size of everything,
Mm,
right?
mm,
But also the fact that it mirrors the sun. You know what I mean?
that's
Like
right.
it's exactly like 1 degree either way, and it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
But it does. It works perfectly,
Yeah.
and the size of our moon relative to the size of our planet. Even if we just look in our local solar system, the size of moons on other planets don't are not equal to the size of our planet. Our moon is abnormally large for the
Yeah.
size of the planet. There's so much about the moon that just doesn't make
Mm,
sense, right? And the number one reason why aren't we back there, right? That's why isn't there a colony
yeah.
on the moon already? Because you would think with the rare earth minerals that are on the moon,
Mm,
you would think the capitalists would have found a way to mine it. Like
exactly.
it's pretty simple. I would have thought.
Yeah.
And you go back to you got to go back to Sumeria, you got to go back to the Masonic texts, you got to go back. There's all
Mm,
sorts of weird stories about the moon. Um,
mm,
Look, the gravity megalith moving is an interesting concept.
mm,
I think to add to that, right? I don't necessarily think it would be the moon. I envisage if we start if you start digging into the free energy stuff, Tesla,
mm.
um, I think they had access to a technology that could manipulate gravity
Yeah.
anyway, right? I
Yeah.
think they understood vibration, magnetism,
Mm-hmm.
sound,
Yep.
D all the above.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way it makes sense they could move the pillars at Baalbek. Or
That's right. Yeah.
how do you put a lintel in the middle of the Great Pyramid? Like,
Mm,
how do you do that if you can't just pick it up like it's a children's toy? Like, it doesn't
yeah.
make sense because it'd be very, very difficult to do
Mm,
now.
yeah.
Even with I know, I've had a few different guys on here explaining a few different theories, water theories and
Yep.
hydrology and
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't explain it all, right?
No.
Those theories, whilst are very interesting, they run out after a while. Like
That's
there's
right.
a certain amount of time before you go, well, how did they do that then? And
Mm,
there's no real answer.
that's right. Yeah.
But the moon, man, look, you know, it's it's weird. I don't know what else
Mm,
to say about the moon because it's like
yeah.
it is a little bit of a deal because I subscribe to the same thing. The only thing with the impact theory is how does everything end up being a perfect circle,
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah.
right?
And that's why I keep that open mind about it, because there are elements that do line up, but there are also elements that don't. So
Mm.
you've got to sort of have that alternative theory.
And with the amount of
Because
craters on the moon, how come we haven't seen an asteroid hit the moon yet?
exactly right. Yeah.
How
Yeah. I
come we
mean,
haven't
look, there
observed
are
it?
those videos going around that apparently there was one recently, but it's obviously fake. Like, you can't really deny that. But one of the other theories that, and I researched this a little bit more, was that the moon was actually placed where it is, to deter meteorites and asteroids. It's like essentially a giant gravitational magnet, designed to stop things hitting the Earth. And that you can Google that as well. There's all these different things that it sort of alludes to. But yeah, it still comes back to the fact that it's in the perfect location.
Yeah.
It's keeping everything the way it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you explain it? So
But also the effect that it has on Homo sapiens sapiens as well,
correct.
right? The effect that it has on the beings on this planet, right? It's like,
Mm,
and everyone's like, oh, yeah, no, that's no, hang on a minute. The lovely ladies in our life, their
mm,
cycle is governed by the moon. Okay,
yes.
that is what it is, right? The
Mm-hmm.
tides, the
Yep.
massive amounts of water are governed by the moon,
Mm,
right? And yeah, I dare you to go and talk to an emergency nurse and tell them that the full moon isn't and is like any other day because it's
yeah.
not. You know what
No.
I mean?
No.
Right now,
Yeah.
whether or not that's people just, I could be crazy. It's a full moon, but
Mm,
I think if we're honest, we've all had, the big moons and stuff like that. Energy is weird. Like if you
yeah.
are sensitive to any of that sort of thing, it's the big moons, the blood moons. Like there's and why did every single ancient culture mark those times, right?
Mm, mm,
These things were marked in the calendar as important, right? And these cycles are marked as important. Why
yep,
the focus, yeah? And it's the
yep,
the general story is, oh, they had nothing to do, they had no, it was all, they had no light pollution, so they could see it. But
mm,
no, it takes, interestingly, 1 degree of the equinox is 72 years, which is the average age of lifespan for a Homo
yeah,
sapiens sapien. That's neither here
yep,
nor there.
mm,
But that means it takes multiple lifetimes to measure what they've measured in some of
yep,
these temples, like in Göbekli Tepe, like
mm,
Stonehenge, like, they're observing this stuff through generations. Or let's take it back to what we're talking about. Was it one being that was observing them for a long time and teaching them to
that's right.
us?
Yeah, yep,
Like,
yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, look, it's one of those things. As I said, it's anomalous, and there's no real right answer about it. And if you look into what mainstream science tells you about the history and how it all formed and all that kind of stuff, if it's been in the same place the entire time since Earth was created, you know, it that cancels out the theory that it was closer to Earth. If
mm,
life to exist on this planet needed that moon to be where it is, it wouldn't have moved.
that's
The
true.
story about it being closer or whatever would be, written off.
And how does it
Um,
move though? Like, you know what I mean?
that's
Like,
right.
how does
Yeah.
it move? It just doesn't.
No.
It's a
It's
planetary
is it being
object, right?
yeah is it being pulled away by the gravity of Mars or Jupiter or whatever else? But how does that work when the planets are revolving around us and unless it like you go back to the Mayan 2012 theory when all the planets were aligned and everything was aligned and everything was just going to be destroyed because you know
The
of the
gravitation.
alignment. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly. But um,
I don't think that
again,
happened. I'm pretty sure.
no, definitely. Well, unless we're living in a simulation right now. But
Let's not start. Don't start. Don't start.
no, 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 no. Get out of that one.
Yeah,
I've got a friend who would love to talk about it, but yeah,
the math suggests that we
it's
are, but we wouldn't know whether we are anyway. So it's a
no,
weird one.
exactly right, exactly. And then there's the other theory, and this was sort of backed up by that movie that I mentioned to you called Moonfall, was
I've
that
got
the
to. Where
Earth
did you
is
find that? Where
essentially.
did you find that on? Where did you find Moonfall? That's what I was
Um,
going to ask you.
it's on one of the streaming services. I can't remember. I'll find it and I'll let you know. But it's either
Because
Netflix or
because it was
Prime.
Halle Berry, wasn't it? And she's is
Yeah, I
that
think
I think it
so.
is Halle Berry because
Possibly, yeah.
it was one of those. Was that a beer virus movie? I think it was, wasn't it? It came out during the chaos.
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember because I remember just watching it once and thinking that was really, really cool, and that was what really started to get me thinking about the moon.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, like it's definitely worth having a look at because it gives you a theory.
Oh, you there, mate? Oh, hang on.
Possibilities. They're talking about the Earth was created. Drove their spaceship in.
Hang on, bud. Hang on. We got a little bit of. Just pause for a second. Just pause for a second. Got a bit of a feedback loop.
Sorry.
That's okay. I can cut it. I can cut it. Are you back?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. Cool. Um, yeah. So essentially, this the original inhabitants of whatever planet they were on were facing destruction of some artificial intelligence that they were escaping. So they came to our area of the solar system, created our planet, and then parked the moon there. As the thing to keep it sort of all moving smoothly. So
Mm.
it's
Which is similar to the Sumerian story, right?
correct.
If you're to
Yeah.
believe Zachariah Sitchin's interpretation of the Sumerian tablets,
Mhm.
and look, I changed my perspective on Sitchin throughout the journey that was Earth's Forbidden Secrets, where on one hand it's like, yeah, you can question Sitchin's translation, but on the other hand, no one spent 50 years trying to do it either. Okay,
That's right.
they like to cherry pick his data. Um,
Mhm.
and do I believe? Am I a Sitchin believer? I don't know, right? But he's the only
Mm.
dude that's put the time in that. Any, you know what I mean? Like and there's some of the tablets they're deciphering. I know they've got a heap of them down in Melbourne. I think one of the universities in
Yeah.
Melbourne is doing some really valuable work with the Babylonian and Sumerian tablets. However, the story is the story, man. I mean, the Sumerian
Mm.
story is that the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter is Tiamat, right? Which was
Yeah.
Earth 2, right?
Yeah.
Which would lead to and then something destroyed Mars. I mean, Mars is like a half peeled
Mhm.
orange, right? So it's like,
That's right. Yeah.
um, and the bottom line is too, like, again, using the 1% rule, uh, some of the pictures coming off Mars are very fascinating, right? Like
That's right. Yeah.
maybe one out of every 100 that I see, where it's like, oh, it's this is no. Look, I'm not
Mm.
subscribing to all of it, but there's, as I
Yeah.
say, out of every bunch that I see, there's two or three that I go, there's something that looks like there's ruins on Mars, right?
Mm.
There really does look like there's ruins on Mars in certain
Yeah.
places.
That's right.
Um, and then there's I can never remember this when I'm on the show, but there's one of the cultures that the measurements that they use make sense. It might be Egypt, actually, I think.
Yeah. They're in qubits.
The cubit makes
Yeah.
sense on Mars, but it doesn't make sense on Earth.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No.
So again, what if everything is true? It's just a matter of time, Alex.
Mm. Mm.
Right. And this
That's
is
right.
where we get to. I mean, do you
Yep.
really think that the moon is Nibiru? I mean, that was one of the things that sort of.
Yeah, look, it was just a thought that I had. Looking at where the orbit of the proposed orbit of where Nibiru goes in and out of the solar system. When it comes into the solar system, it moves between Mars and Jupiter, which is where the asteroid belt is.
Yeah.
So there's that side of things, but then you've also got what happens if, as it was coming through, they talk about the Anunnaki coming to Earth because they knew that their planet was going to be destroyed. They got up all these resources so that they could build a fleet or whatever it was that they needed to do before their planet was destroyed. It's hit Mars, destroyed its civilization, if it had one, and ultimately, you've got the asteroid belt still there. But where does the remainder of the planet, if there is any, where does that go? And Earth being slightly bigger than Mars would have had the gravitational pull to possibly pull it into orbit around itself. So
True.
it's just an idea. It's
No, like
purely just speculation.
it's one
Yeah.
of the ones. I had heard it before, but I hadn't heard it put like that. I mean, probably.
Mm.
And look, I'm using sort of Max Egan's interpretation along with Sitchin's
Yeah.
interpretation, along with my own research, that something's causing the whole solar system to wobble, which is basically that's what they say, that the 10th planet's out there somewhere. And if you listen to the interpretation, so if you take what science has said, is that they think it's maybe the other star, like, because obviously a lot of star systems, we thought that a single star was normal, whereas the last 15 years we now know that we are actually abnormal. Most star systems have two stars, or solar systems have two stars, I should say. That and the Sumerian story goes is that the planet they needed the gold to create the shield for their planet, because the orbit is so long that they spend a percentage of time in the darkness of the solar system, basically.
That's
out
right.
of the reach of the sun.
Yeah.
And if you think about the cycle of the equinox, and then if we go back to that slide we saw of Randall's and the ones that are shaded blue that happened at the ends of the cycles, so that was the theory we postulated there. It's like, well, are they measuring the time that body comes back in the solar system, right? But then because we're going around like this, and then this one's going around like that, every third or fourth round, it passes really close to Earth, which causes, and it may drag asteroids and stuff in, which cause cataclysms potentially, right? And the spooky theory that I had about that, Alex, remember how I said the magnetic poles are converging? Because the other theory about Nibiru is that it's a metal planet, like it's a big iron ball.
That's right.
Right. So it's like, what if the poles converging is because the Earth is picking up the the big
Yep.
iron
The
ball
magnetic force.
that's
Yep.
coming towards us from somewhere, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
because it doesn't have a, they keep from memory that, well, they said the 10th planet was, now Pluto's a planet
Mm.
too. You don't just,
Yeah, no, I 100% believe Pluto is a
yeah,
planet,
yeah.
and
So
would
that's good.
never ever talk
Look,
otherwise.
one of my favorite memes the last few years is like, I'm not saying demoting Pluto, which is the god of everything, pretty much was a good idea, but look around. Like,
He's pissed.
yeah, I don't think telling everybody that he didn't exist is a good idea. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
hasn't been real good since we did that. I
Mm,
can't
mm.
remember the name of that small planet they ended up calling the 10th planet, but there's another one they
Yeah.
keep sort of
Was it
seeing but not
was it
seeing.
Eris or something like that?
Eris,
Was it
that's the one. That's the
Eris?
one.
Yeah,
Eris, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Sorry,
We've
got a
got a visitor.
visitor.
That's all right. Um, yeah, look, man, the Nibiru thing, the Sumerian story, which the to me, again, using the 1% rule and using the common sense and using all the other research, there's truth in there. I think. I
Mm,
think there's truth in there. What that truth is, I'm not brave enough to say. However,
yeah.
our obsession with gold is interesting. There's so many different levels to that. But yeah,
Mm,
look, the moon being a satellite and parked there, in a lot of ways, that's the only thing that makes sense.
that's right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
is it Nibiru? I don't think so. And
Yeah.
that's only because of the deeper dive into the actual what
Mm,
the ancient texts say Nibiru was, as
that's right.
opposed
Yeah.
to,
Yep.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's definitely something, right? I
Mm,
mean, if
mm,
we're to believe the asteroid belt was Tiamat,
mhm.
um, what existed on Tiamat, that sort of lends to the
Yeah.
moonfall stuff, doesn't it? Right. So
Exactly right. Yeah.
if Tiamat was larger than Earth and, being a little bit further away from the sun, and it maybe had a bit more of an ideal condition that we do here,
Mm,
and maybe we needed the moon in order to make the conditions here livable for hominids, right? Which sort
that's
of
right.
is sort of
Yeah.
what you're saying, isn't it? Like,
Yep.
maybe dinosaurs could exist here because it was chaos, and things
Mm,
could get big because there was no governance of gravity and
yep.
magnetosphere and that sort of stuff, right? Which
Yeah.
sort of goes back to the
Yeah.
start where we were, mate. Which is very interesting, man.
Mm,
It's interesting.
yeah.
Well,
It definitely is.
what did you want to do, mate? Did you? I mean, I sort of feel like we've got a couple more topics left, but I think, I mean, we
Mm.
sort of, like, we can brush up on the extra ultra. Intraterrestrial is probably the only question I had. What is an intraterrestrial?
So,
I hadn't
from
heard
what I
that one.
understand, intraterrestrial is basically something that lives underground or under the earth,
Ah, okay.
internally. Yeah. So
So an
that
ultra terrestrial is an advanced being that's still
yeah,
here or was here and whatever. Yeah.
yeah, or possible. I think they talk about interdimensional. That I think
Okay.
that ultra
Yeah. Yeah.
terrestrial is that can travel between dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, extraterrestrial is off world. Intra is underworld.
Okay. I hadn't
And
heard
that
that.
that sort of lends to that theory of under the underground, or in caverns, or
In the
under the
ocean.
ice caps
Yeah.
in the under the ocean.
Mhm.
Exactly right. All of these things that we're hearing about, the tic tacs and stuff at the moment are
Well, look, I mean,
meant.
that's, as I've said before, you can, the whole movie thing where you see bullets and arrows flying through the water is totally inaccurate, right? You can,
Yeah, that's right.
I remember the Mythbusters back in the day, they fired a 50 cal sniper rifle at a pool and it stopped within 3 feet.
That's right. Yeah.
So, if you had been a being, again, let's pretend, okay, let's go right back to the start. Let's pretend there was a reptilian species that was something that had aquatic elements to it.
Mhm.
Don't want to say Q Jar Jar, but you know what I'm saying, right? Um, there was a an element, and we looked at the cataclysm list, right?
Mm.
So you've existed on this planet on the surface for X hundred thousands of years, and you've observed the fact
Yep.
that every now and again things go terribly wrong.
Mhm.
But if you go under the ocean, it's all good, right? So
Exactly
it's
right.
like,
Yeah.
how long before you would move under there if you had that ability and you evolved
Yeah.
in that manner? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's the question.
Yeah, and if you also have the technology, to bend gravity to make your craft or whatever it is travel through,
Yeah,
you know,
if you had a
everything at an
anti-gravity.
instant speed, you can do that underwater as well.
That's right. Well, I mean, I think one of the craziest Tic Tac videos that I'd seen, and I only ever it was this guy test running his drone over a gorge somewhere in America, and it was just raw footage. It was he goes, "This is
Mm.
the first day I got my drone. I just wanted to take it up over the gorge and just have a bit of a look around and play with the camera." And then yeah, this Tic Tac comes out of the screen and just into the rock,
Yep. Yep.
right? Because these whatever these craft are, they don't affect the matter around them. They
That's
can
right.
pass through matter, which
Mm.
and again we go back to, as I say, today the first day at Congress where Grush, he said that it was all real, man. Right.
Yeah.
So then you
Yeah.
then you tack that onto that, right? I mean,
Mhm.
how many of these craft are ancient craft,
Yep.
which is the
That's
other
right.
story, right? Is that
Mm.
percentage of these craft they found,
Hmm.
you know?
Yep. They dug them up and they reverse engineered them.
Yeah. I
Or
mean, I
they've,
don't
or they've,
know. It's it and again, then you go back to there's all sorts of conspiracies around some of the stuff they got out of Iraq when they
Mhm.
went to Iraq.
Yep.
And, one of the boys that has been on the show before, I can't remember whether he told the story, so I won't tell him,
Mm.
but he had a friend who was a Marine he went to Iraq the second time. And the first thing they did is they drove to the museums and they stood guard outside the museums while people went in there, filled their trucks and left, and no one told them what
Yeah.
was in the
Right.
back of the trucks.
Yep.
That actually happened. That's no
Yeah.
bullshit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yep.
So what are they getting, right? I mean, because
Mm.
Babylonia, Iraq, that's
Yep.
theoretically the seat of civilization. If
That's
we
right.
if we ignore Turkey,
Yep.
which we're not going to be
Yep.
able to for very long.
No.
Um, Look, man, it's the UAP, UFO, intra ultra extraterrestrial stuff. We can probably put a pin in that because it's ever evolving,
Mhm.
right?
That's right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, did you want to be included? We're gonna get some panels together over the next little while about that stuff. I might put
Yeah.
your name on the list, mate. See if
Yeah.
you
For
can't
sure.
come and join us.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Because the more opinions we have, I think the better off we all are. I think
Mm.
it's important to have as many different perspectives and
Mm.
variations of opinion.
Yeah.
Um,
The other thing too with that, and I won't dig too much into it, but all of the news reports and like the Ross Coultharts and all these mainstream um, researchers and journalists that are getting into it now as well, it's bringing more and more to light.
well, I
It's
think a
it's
lot
it's
of
becoming
these.
more accepted.
Well, I think Ross himself even said that he didn't think there was much there, and then
Mm,
he kept digging and kept digging
that's
and
right.
kept digging. I mean, as you found UTC through Anthony, Can
Yeah,
Candace Down Under, he's doing very
yeah,
valuable work.
that's right.
With the work he's doing, he's not been well
Mm.
lately. Actually, we were trying
No,
to
that's a shame.
we're
Yeah,
trying to bring him back online. Maybe, yeah, I don't know, maybe late next week. We're
yeah,
trying to nail down times and
yeah.
dates.
I
But
hope he feels better. And because like I listen to his show quite a bit as well, and there's elements of things that I could probably talk to him about as well, which I won't go into now. But
no, no, mate,
there's
I'll put you
it's
two
all
in touch, man.
everything that all the subjects, and that one thing I've started to realize more and more is that everything is connected. With
Absolutely,
it's all part of the story,
all
and
part of it, man.
yeah,
Everything is
and
everything is everything. Yeah, and
exactly, yeah,
you've got to be able to zoom out far enough to see that. I think,
yep, that's it.
because it's only then that the larger picture is going to come together. If we can all let go of our belief systems and our whatever it is, and we can actually zoom out and see it's all the same,
Yep.
it's all the same story. It's actually all one and the same, and it's probably weirder and darker and stranger than even we can imagine. Right.
Mhm.
However, I think and as I say, thanks for coming on tonight, man. I really appreciate it. I had a really good conversation. Look,
Yep.
this is only your first one, mate. We're not done.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I'm
Right.
keen. I'm definitely keen.
We're not done, so don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Because it's another kindred spirit, Alex. Right?
Mm.
You know what I mean. You research this stuff because you have to. Okay.
Yep.
It's like I sat down with my wife before I came on tonight, and I realized that between tonight's show and tomorrow's show, I put together like 20 pages of notes, and
Mm.
I didn't even really think about it. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And you look down and you're like 20 pages in, it's like, oh, okay. But if I look at the notes for tonight and I look at the notes for tomorrow, they're
Mm.
not dissimilar, right?
No, that's right.
There's going to be a deeper dive into different things that we brushed upon tonight.
Yeah.
However, it's all part of the story, and it's
Mm.
all coming around, mate.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Alex, thanks very much, man. Look, we'll leave the last topic because I think it's sort of
Yeah.
it steps outside of the things we've spoken about tonight.
Correct. Yeah.
We
It
and we
does.
can come back. We can come back because it needs to be spoken about.
It does.
For the listeners, it's religious and government cover-ups, but
Mm.
we I'm actually doing some more research on that myself. So maybe coming back around to that to another day
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
not a bad thing. But it's your first show, mate. You did a good job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have you got anything you want to leave the listeners to think about before we knock off for the night?
Not really, but I think when you look at this stuff, as I sort of said earlier, you've got to keep an open mind to it all. Sit on the fence, sort of thing. Look at
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
information that's in front of you. Look at the mainstream science and what they're saying, but question it. Don't just believe what they say,
Critical
because
thinking,
exactly
Alex.
right. You've got to
Critical
have
thinking.
critical thinking, because ultimately, that'll bring you to the answer I think that we need, and the truth. I think the truth, as Fox Mulder said, the truth is out there.
Yep.
And I think we'll get there one day. I think it's starting to change. The narrative is shifting. People are starting to wake up, and I think we'll get there eventually. But yeah, just keep that mind open and don't prescribe yourself to one belief.
Spot on, mate. In true UTC fashion. Thanks very much, Alex. Until next time, mate. Look after yourself.
Thank you. You too. Cheers, mate.
Good on you, mate. Cheers. Just want to go again?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Go again.
All right. I know you been here before. No surprises settle the score. I know the darkness deep inside. Reckless rage, poison pride. I know the anger, I know the pain, and I know the fear we do not name. And the one who comes to find me when my time is through, I know you, I know you. Wow! I know you. Better.